Well, good morning. I am recording this for Instagram and YouTube and Facebook at the same time. And so I'm going to be looking back and forth at two different cameras because I don't want to have to do it twice. But I am glad to be able to join you this morning. And I have been working on a lesson for us to start for the next few weeks in this time on Sunday mornings. I would invite you to listen to this, watch this video sometime in the early part of the week, so you have time to think about these things we're going to talk about today and reflect on them before the next week comes around. But hopefully, what we talk about will be something that will be something that will want you to bring you back, and you want to dig a little deeper. We're gonna dive into a passage of scripture, which is typically our practice on Sunday mornings, is to spend time in scripture. And I prayed and went through my library, and I looked at a lot of different things as what we could go through right now. We've been primarily doing video series on Wednesday, and I wanted us to kind of dive into a section of scripture that I think will be meaningful in this season that we're in. And this passage has a few different names. It comes from Matthew chapter 5, and that section is often referred to as the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is preaching to a crowd of people. It also goes by the name of the Beatitudes. And we'll talk more as we go along what that word means. But I want us to start by just kind of getting the background, and we're not going to go super long this morning. I don't want this video to be something that you're like, oh, I'm done. He's going to ramble on forever. It's going to be kind of around 10 minutes. And so I would encourage us to stick with this to the end, and then we'll pick up where we left off next week, and just begin making our way through this passage. So again, Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5. I'm going to switch over to where you can see my digital Bible, and I would like us to read it from the Common English translation, and then we'll look at it in the NIV, because some of you will go, oh, that's what we're talking about. In fact, we'll start with the NIV. So we'll start with the NIV, and then you can see the difference in how different it sounds depending on the different translation. So the NIV reads this way: Matthew chapter 5, beginning with verse 3, or if we back up just a little bit to verse 5. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and he sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So that is a more, some of you will be more familiar with this version, and coming from the NIV. I want us to read it again from the Common English. And we want to compare. There's some pretty significant differences in these translations, and that's why I want us to look at both of them. Happy are the people who are hopeless, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Happy are the people who grieve, because they will be made glad. Happy are people who are humble, because they will inherit the earth. Happy are people who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, because they will be fed until they are full. Happy are people who show mercy, because they will receive mercy. Happy are people who have pure hearts, because they will see God. Happy are people who make peace, because they will be called God's children. Happy are people whose lives are harassed, because they are righteous, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And lastly, happy are you when people insult you and harass you and speak all kinds of bad and false things about you, all because of me. Be full of joy and be glad, because you have had a great reward. You have had a great reward in heaven. In the same way, people harassed the prophets who came before you. Well, just reading that passage alone has taken about half of our time today, and I want us to focus in on verse 3 today. This very first phrase, happy are the people who are hopeless, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Or blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That word poor is what I want us to think about today. Well, what does it mean to be poor in spirit or hopeless? And yet, the Common English says we're going to be happy, and the NIV says we're blessed if we're poor or we're hopeless. What does that mean? How could that be possible? And I like how one person put it, in that when Jesus is preaching here, he basically turns everything upside down, and he's basically saying the normal rules no longer apply. That what you think is the normal way of thinking about things, it's backwards. And the people who are blessed are the people who are poor, or the people who are hopeless. How can that be possible? I think we need to think about, what does Jesus mean when he says poor? I really like the idea of thinking about poor in terms of poverty. Poverty many times means that we don't have money, we don't have material resources. But what could it mean if we think about this idea of poverty instead as kind of poverty of spirit? One person I looked at feels really strongly that if we go down that road and we talk about spiritual poverty, what does that look like? And he's convinced that it has everything to do with being humble and realizing that part of what Jesus is saying here is that the people who are happy are humble. They're poor in spirit. They have a poverty that says, I don't have everything that I need on my own. I need God to be complete. Or in the terms of the verse, to be happy or to be blessed. I need to become hopeless or poor in order to be filled with what God has to give me. That is something I don't think we're good at thinking about. We're not necessarily good at thinking about, what does it mean to become poor, to be poor in spirit. And it's important to realize that in much of Scripture, God talks about the people who are poor in really uplifting ways. Sing for joy, O heavens, and exult, O earth, break forth, O mountains, into singing, for the Lord has comforted his people and will have compassion on the afflicted. Can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should have no compassion for the son in her womb? Even these may forget, yet I will not forget you. Behold, I have written your name on the palm of my hands. So this idea that the people who are humble, contrite, they are the ones that receive God's presence. Here's some Psalms. For the needy shall not always be forgotten, and the hope of the poor shall not perish forever. For he has not despised or abhorred the affliction of the afflicted, and he has not hid his face from him, but has heard when he cried. He leads the humble in what is right and teaches the humble in his way. The poor man cried, and the Lord heard him. So the idea here is not poor in terms of money. We hear the word poor and we think money. But Jesus is using the word poor, and I like how the Common English renders it. The word that they choose to use is hopeless instead of poor. And the promise is that those who are poor or hopeless, the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Now, this will make more sense as we go along, but here's the thing I want you to reflect on this week. I said we'd be about 10 minutes, and we're already passing that. The thing I want you to think about this week is, God, what would it look like for me to willingly choose to become poor in spirit, to become hopeless, so that I might receive what God has to give me? That I would purposely try to be humble and meek, to have this poverty of the spirit, so that I can experience more of God. So many times we try to approach God in a way that says, I've got it figured out. I know what I need to do. And maybe part of this is coming to God and saying, help me to be humble. Help me to realize that what I really need is you. And that's what will allow me to experience your presence, to experience the kingdom of heaven. So, I hope that you'll take a look at this passage. I hope that you'll read through it a few times, and so that as we turn back to this passage in the coming weeks, it will be something that you begin to come familiar with. And I hope you can think about this idea of, what does it mean for me to be spiritually poor, to become hopeless, so that I can receive hope and recognize that I need God in my life in order to be at peace. I hope you have a great week. I'm praying for you guys, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all on Zoom on Wednesday. Remember, we meet on Wednesday at 7:15 in the teen Zoom meeting. And if you're not getting the text messages from me that tell you when and where and how to get into that meeting, please check out the church website and look for all that information. It'll be posted there, sfnaz.org/youth. And we play some games. We're going through a video series on Psalm 23 right now, and it's just fun to get to see each other online. So if you haven't joined us yet on Zoom, I would really encourage you to do that and join us there. And looking forward to see you then. And we'll be back here again on next Sunday, looking at more of the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5. Thanks for checking this video out. You are loved and you are missed.